Chapter.
Okay, members, we are quorate here this morning. I'd like to welcome everybody on to the weekly meeting of the DAERA committee. The committee will be recorded and broadcast online and throughout Parliament buildings. You can use mobile devices as long as they're in airplane mode and muted. The first item that I have on my agenda is apologies, and I don't actually have any apologies. Second item is chairperson's business. It relates to members' attendance record. At page 4 of your pack is a link to a record of attendance at committee meetings. As this is published on the website and routinely included in the committee's end of mandate legacy report, can I ask you to please check the record for accuracy and any anomalies to the committee office. Okay, members. Next item I have down here is instruction to withdraw staff from the ports of entry. You'll recall last week that we sought an urgent briefing from the DAERA Permanent Secretary and CVO in respect of the implications of the Minister's instruction to suspend SPS checks at ports. You'll be aware that following our meeting, an initial judicial review hearing was held on the Friday the 4th of February, and Justice Colton ordered suspension on the Minister's instruction until full proceedings are completed at a hearing scheduled on the 7th of March. Following this development, the clerk advised me that any briefing in this matter would be sub judice, and I sort of took the view that the officials are not likely to engage as fulsome as possible at this particular time. And I suggested, Nick, that we don't call the senior office officials at this particular time and perhaps wait to the outcome of the legal proceedings. However, I suggest that we seek an urgent response from the Department in writing in respect to the potential implications of the instruction should be followed through in respect to trade, supply chain, staff, animal and plant health, and what mitigations the Department would intend to implement. Members, any comment on that there, or what you're thinking? Okay, mention that. Nick, do you want to pick up on anything there? Have enough?
Chair, no, that's fine. Thank you. We'll follow up with the Department in writing to seek those assurances and await the outcome of the full legal proceedings to take any further action.
Thank you. Okay, members, the 21-22 budget report. It's at page 10 of the pack. Briefing paper by the clerk on the budget report. Nick, do you want to give a briefing on that budget report?
Chair, thank you. Yes, indeed. So, members, by way of follow-up to the oral briefing we received from officials at the Department on the 20th of January, the Committee for Finance has asked for a short summary from our committee in respect of its views of DAERA's current in-year budget expenditure and proposals. And so a short paper has been provided for consideration by members. So the paper simply outlines the main elements of DAERA's spend, both in resource and capital expenditure. In terms of resource expenditure, the paper outlines that around 55% of DAERA's total resource budget is allocated to facilitate direct foreign payments, and highlights that prior to this financial year, these have been funded via the EU, and that this is the first year that the UK government has pledged to maintain the same level of resource commitment for direct payments, and just under £316 million was allocated for this in this year. The second most costly element of DAERA's resource budget is £144 million associated with DAERA salaries and wages costs. The paper also highlights the bulk of spend associated with maintaining the Department's bovine TB control programme, which runs at around £36 to £40 million per year, and highlights that officials told us that they anticipate that around £26 million of compensation will be paid out this year to farmers affected by TB. Also added commentary to the paper highlighting the fact that the committee has recently engaged with DAERA on its proposals for a future strategy to eradicate bovine TB, and hopefully this will in the future reduce the level of incidence and the associated spend. The paper also highlights that £18.8 million was allocated in this financial year to support EU exit costs, and on the 20th of January we were advised that the department projects that the entirety of the spend will be incurred by the end of the financial year. In respect of capital expenditure, around £29 million of DAERA's capital budget is incurred through research and development activities at AFB, and acknowledging the committee's support for developing evidence base and information to support DAERA's projects, for example, around a better understanding around carbon sequestration and optimising livestock genetics. Around £20 million of DAERA's capital expenditure is allocated for digital transformation, which encompasses a range of initiatives, including the rollout of the Northern Ireland Farm Animal Information System, which we've heard in recent weeks is going to be crucial for facilitating the proposed new system of farm payments. We've also highlighted that in the current financial year, DAERA used £9 million of its capital funding to support various COVID-19 temporary support schemes, including transferring around £6.5 million to the Department of Communities to bolster the COVID-19 recovery small settlement scheme, and the committee's welcome and support for that action. And similarly highlights the support for the committee's support for DAERA's action in respect of transferring £7.5 million of capital funding to the Department for Economy to support Project Stratum. On page 4 of the summary report, it does highlight the committee's concerns with regards to the net capital reduced requirement declared by the department this financial year, which constitutes a net amount of £7.5 million, and highlights that the largest components of this comprise £3 million associated with delays against the progression of a livestock genomics business case, and the paper outlines the concerns that the committee discussed with officials on the 20th of January about that. It also highlights the £2.5 million reduced capital requirement associated with the Rural Development Programme, which we were advised of in January, in the January monitoring round stage 2. So in terms of some of the potential issues that the committee may wish to highlight to the Committee for Finance, in terms of resource spend, the committee understands that DAERA's resource expenditure, there's relatively little flexibility within that, given the commitments to deliver direct farm payments and facilitate staff pay. But I suppose there are two potential areas of note in the current year, and that is the £18.8 million of EU exit funding, and recognising the need for additional resources to deliver and sustain DAERA's obligations as set out in the protocol. However, it may be worth seeking assurances from the department on how that budget has been utilised this year, and to seek a full breakdown of that, especially given the information that we have seen in the EU Commission's report about the lack of extent of delivery of the cheques, and we know that some activities have been suspended or not fully implemented. And then also, again, mentioning the incurrence of a large amount of costs associated with bovine TB compensation. And then just to mention with regards to capital budget management, that the committee welcomes the allocation of funding to support infrastructure projects in rural communities, but highlighting its concern about the significant amount declared in underspend this year, and consideration that there are many potential opportunities where this resource could have been used alternatively, for example, through bolstering current rural development programmes and addressing other pressing needs, such as the challenges in the meat processing sector, and highlighting generally that the committee considers that there could have been a more proactive and forward-looking approach by the department when seeking opportunities for additional finance through monitoring round exercises in the year. So, Chair, that's a summary of the key points of the paper, and happy to take any comments or changes to from members.
Nick, tell me this, see in relation to the 18.8 million of EU exit funding for that 21-22 period, is there any assessment or any indication in the department about where this has actually been spent?
So, Chair, We have not been provided with granular detail on that, so we were advised that there was simply £18.8 million, and that was ostensibly to help recruit additional staff and other measures. And in the oral briefing on the 20th of January, the department officials advised that they expect that full amount to be incurred, but we haven't been provided as yet with, as I say, a specific breakdown on how much of that has gone to staff costs, maybe new projects, maybe new systems, and that might be some worthwhile considering pursuing that.
Because I'm thinking in the context of the report from the EU Commission that they weren't satisfied with the scale and extent of the checks being carried out here, so I'm wondering what has that actually been spent on? Fundamental shortcomings in implementation of protocol activities. That's the view from the EU Commission, yet there's 18.8 million in EU exit funding. I think that's important to get to the bottom of that there. Okay. Thank you. And I think also it's important as well the fact that the department has declared, obviously a net surplus, and certainly as someone like myself who has a lengthy involvement in rural development activities in terms of basic services and the need for infrastructure in rural communities, I do believe that there should be better horizon scanning carried out to look at schemes which, there's plenty of schemes in the pipeline that could be used to absorb that money. I think that would be important that the department would engage in that type of horizon scanning sooner in the year, so we don't end up with effectively handing back money. Okay, thanks for that there, Nick. I'm going to move on here now. We have the draft minutes. That's at page 18 of the pack. Members okay for me to sign off the draft minutes? Yeah. Okay, some of the matters arising. Greenhouse Gas Emissions Trading Scheme Amendment Order 2022. You recall that we referred the above regulations, which are subject to affirmative resolution, to the examiner statutory rules for scrutiny. ESR is advised that as these rules comprise part of a statutory instrument, the examiner cannot report on these. The department provided the committee with supporting documentation on these regulations, which make technical and operational amendments to the UK ETS to ensure consistent enforcement of scheme rules and powers of entry. Members okay that I put the question that Committee for Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs considered the Greenhouse Gas Emissions Trading Scheme Amendment Order 2022 and recommends that it be affirmed by Assembly. Okay. Members, review of decisions panel. For your information, the department has advised the committee that it is about to start recruitment for the review of decisions independent panels, which will be live from April of this year. This follows our consideration of policy changes and regulations on this matter last year. Okay, members, we'll move on now to item number 5. It's the DAERA. It's an oral briefing from DAERA on the avian influenza update. You'll be aware that we previously asked the department to provide a regular update on the local situation in respect of avian influenza. We received our last briefing on the 13th of January, and we've now been provided a written update at page 30 of your packs. I want to welcome the following officials to the meeting and invite them to brief us. Jim Blee, the Deputy Director, Animal Health and Welfare, and Gemma Daly, Senior Principal Veterinary Officer. And I will ask you to give a briefing, and members will then will wish to ask questions. So you're very welcome this morning, Jim and Gemma.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Yeah.
And I apologies. Jim is unfortunately sick this week. So my name is Neil Gartland, Director of Animal Health and Welfare Division, and I'm joined today by Senior Principal Veterinary Officer, as you mentioned, Gemma Daly, and Charlotte Stewart, Head of Animal Disease Control. So apologies about that, Chair, for that late change. Okay. And just to say thank you to you and members of the committee, and thank you for the opportunity to update you today on the current AI outbreak across the UK and Republic of Ireland and the developments since the department's last appearance with Jim in the lead on the 13th of January. Of course, after I finish your opening remarks, we'll answer any questions committee members may have. As of today, 86 cases of HPAI H5N1 have been confirmed across GB. That's since the first case was confirmed in England on the 26th of October 2021. To note, when my colleague Jim last addressed the committee on the 13th of January, confirmed cases stood at 74 across GB. In the Republic of Ireland, as of today, AI has been confirmed at 6 premises, 5 in County Monaghan and 1 in County Cavan. The disease control zones for 4 of these cases extended into NI, and corresponding zones were established here to limit the onward spread of disease. All disease control zones enacted around premises in the Republic of Ireland have now been lifted. Across Northern Ireland, as of today, there have now been 6 confirmed cases of AI. In addition to the 5 cases previously notified to the committee, a 6th case of HPAI was recently confirmed at a premises in Enniskillen, County Fermanagh. AI was suspected at the premises on the 4th of February. Temporary control zones were declared around the suspected infected premises to mitigate against onward disease spread. Following confirmation of AI, the temporary control zones have now been revoked and replaced by a 3-kilometre protection zone and 10-kilometre surveillance zone, effective from the 8th of February 2022. This is a small backyard flock of mixed species consisting of approximately 28 birds. DAERA officials communally culled all birds at the site on the 7th of February 2022, and officials now are also carrying out the necessary tracing, surveillance activities and licensing within those zones that we have established. For information, all disease control zones enacted around the first 5 affected sites, which you are already aware of, have now all been lifted following that extensive surveillance exercised by officials across all zones. Colleagues and members, you'll be aware that PZ has been in place in Northern Ireland since the 17th of November 2021. In addition to that, a mandatory housing order was introduced on Monday the 29th of November. This further disease prevention measure legally requires birds to be housed or otherwise kept separate from wild birds. Housing orders are also in place across Great Britain and the Republic of Ireland. Both these measures are still in place and will continue to be until the risk of a further AI incursion reduces. The latest DAERA Northern Ireland Veterinary Risk Assessment concludes that the risk of an AI incursion to domestic poultry in Northern Ireland is still moderate, with the biosecurity at individual flock level being of critical importance. Veterinary officials will keep these measures under regular review in collaboration with industry stakeholders and colleagues in both Great Britain and the Republic of Ireland. A detailed breakdown of costs associated with this current ongoing AI outbreak is not available at this stage, but will be published in due course when the outbreak ends. As you're aware, the Minister made a successful bid at the January monitoring round for an additional 4 million resource DEL funding to respond to this outbreak, which we were pleased was agreed by the Executive. Compensation has been agreed at 3 of the 6 infected premises. The remaining 2 sites, Auchnacoy and Ballinderry, are subject to the ongoing valuation process. We expect Ballinderry to be agreed by the close of the week, with Auchnacoy expected to incur a significant compensation bill. But good work and progress being made with the affected keeper to conclude the process there also. And then the 6th site, only recently confirmed, will be engaging on the valuation process for those 28 culled birds now. Are engaged with. Members, the department is very much aware of the devastating impact an AI incursion has on those affected poultry keepers. It's not just financial, and in addition to the stress it can cause wider industry. And working with Rural Support, we're pleased that they will be taking forward a number of both virtual and live events focused specifically at poultry keepers. These events will aim to promote the wide range of support available to the sector, particularly during the heightened levels of pressure caused by the ongoing threat of disease outbreak. The events have been scheduled to begin in week commencing the 21st of February and will initially run for 4 weeks. Chair, I know the committee was very much interested in lessons learned with regards to this current outbreak of AI. With disease incursion on this scale, there are always lessons that can be learned and best practice to be promoted, and I'd like to take a moment to update you on this work. With regards to lessons learned, there are 2 aspects. The first is the real-time outbreak response improvements made by officials as we have worked through this season's AI outbreak. For example, as a result of feedback from industry, we have furthered our online presence and the information available to industry and the public with the development of a dedicated online Avian Influenza hub. This online hub has improved signposting to the latest information and provides guidance to help flock keepers taking action to protect their flocks. It includes a new downloadable biosecurity checklist developed in cooperation with the British Poultry Council, ease of access to the DAERA Avian Influenza map viewer, as well as links to other government websites. The hub also provides advice to the general public on a range of topics, including wild birds and bird gatherings. In addition, recognising the need for efficient processing of licences for the movement of birds from and within the control zones, Digital Services Division within DAERA developed at pace a digital licensing application. With the first version have been discussed later this week is progressing. All being well, we expect a final version may be available to go live at some point next week. Stakeholder engagement has been more regular during this outbreak than previous outbreaks. DAERA officials continue to meet with industry stakeholders, most recently yesterday, to engage closely in regards to this current AI outbreak, to heighten awareness and deliver key messages on how to protect the Northern Ireland poultry flock from further AI incursions, including adopting, most importantly, the stringent biosecurity measures required. Furthermore, in order to reach backyard flock keepers, DAERA has engaged with NI libraries and developed display screen messaging for their in-house plasma screens. This messaging reaffirms the importance of biosecurity to prevent disease incursion. This plasma screen messaging has also been shared with DAERA direct offices and departmental accommodation representatives across the NICS government estate. Finally, the communications plan via the press office will continue as long as the threat of AI to Northern Ireland remains in this current season. We have a range of new and refreshed communications planned over the next few months. The aim is that this will help keep interest levels high among our stakeholders, as we are not yet out of the woods yet, as the most recent avian influenza case in Fermanagh has shown us. We would want to avoid complacency as the threat remains. The second stage of this work in terms of lessons learned are for us to focus on the medium and long term, which will be undertaken by all jurisdictions as a review once this outbreak is over. Some of the key areas of focus will include the timings for our key messages from the department to both industry and the public. While it is very difficult to predict the timing and intensity of an outbreak, the AI outbreak this year was earlier and more intensive than we have ever seen before. We have already begun assessing our response to the outbreak, and will use lessons learned to strengthen the response to future outbreaks, including the possible need to heighten our messages of good biosecurity in the poultry industry earlier, and our wider communication plan. And in addition, other areas of focus, once this outbreak subsides, will be on resourcing requirements, including building staff resilience and training staff for response readiness for an incursion of this type, and to see what lessons can be learned from our operational readiness, deployment of staff in the field, licensing centres, and the DAERA work progressed with respect to the visits and advice provided within the surveillance zones. Thank you for your time, Chair and members, and we're happy to take any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Neil. Neil, one of the things I'd like to get your assessment of is, the fact that we are no longer considered AI-free under the World Organization for Animal Health rules. Does the department have any assessment of the impact this might have for trade, particularly with third countries?
Thank you very much, Chair. So as you rightly outlined, AI is in the UK, and so we've lost our OIE freedom from avian influenza. This does have an impact on trade. We don't have an assessment in terms of numbers, and we work on this on a case-by-case basis. Really, Chair, what this depends on is the import conditions of the third countries that our exporters are sending products to. And some of them have certain conditions. For example, some will take product from outside the zones, while some will build up a picture of a disease outbreak and only take products from outside a county or outside a particular defined government area using sort of blocks and council areas and wards. So it is on a case-by-case basis. Industry, we have kept informed obviously throughout the outbreak, and our trade facilitation team have been very fully much engaged with any of the issues that have been raised as we've went through the outbreak. As I said, it is on a country-by-country and specific industry-by-industry, product-by-product basis, and we're working very closely with DEFRA Market Access on that. We've also made it quite clear that if industry or any particular company does come into a difficulty with respect to any particular country, depending again on the specific import conditions, to contact us and we'll work with them on it. I don't have any specific figures in terms of potential impact from this season's outbreak, but just be aware that we are working very closely with industry on this.
And tell me, Neil, I know the issue of like a hotline has been raised at this committee whenever there's previous briefings. Is there like a hotline, a dedicated number that where farmers or people who suspect the presence of AI, or even for advice, is there a dedicated hotline the department have for people to ring?
I'm going to bring Jem in on the hotline in 1 second. But yes, the numbers are widely available, particularly around findings of birds that are suspected. As AI is a notifiable disease, it is a legal requirement to notify the department when disease is suspected. In addition to that, there, Chair, the AI Hub gives a wealth of information around AI, both to the public and industry. It is something that we've utilised very heavily this year, and we found to be very successful in getting key messages out in real time. I also know that in terms of the wild bird findings, I know that there was concern over this previously around the messaging and availability of the hotline. On the wild birds issue, we have commenced wild bird surveillance once again, and we've already updated the hotline and the key messaging about where the public can go to contact the department in that instance that they do find a bird that they suspect. But Gemma, is there anything else to add on that? Thank you.
Gemma, you're on mute. Still on mute, Gemma? Can't hear you. No, we're not getting you. Not getting you. Listen, sure. If we can overcome that, you might try to come back in again. Okay, Gemma. Okay, members. I'm going to move around the room here now. First, I've got Rosemary Barton who wants to ask a question. Rosemary.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Neil, for that presentation. Obviously, with the latest outbreak in Fermanagh, you'll not be surprised that I'm quite interested in it. You say it's around the Enniskillen area. I know around the Enniskillen area there are quite a number of commercial flocks in relation to keeping of hens. Have these other flocks been made aware of this outbreak and that they are within the various zones? They have been personally notified, I presume?
Yes, Rosemary, all of the flock keepers within the area that are registered with the department will have been contacted to outline whether or not they're in a PZ or an SZ. And I can give you a bit further information on that. Within the PZ, we have 11 sites in total, 11 premises, 9 of them are backyard. And within the surveillance zone, the 10-kilometre zone, there are 79 premises in total, 75 of those being backyard. In terms of the commercial sites, they have also been notified. And as I say, we are open if anyone wants to contact the department through our helpline or through our local divisional veterinary office to provide any further advice or guidance as needed. And Rosemary, in addition to that, as you know, within the zones, obviously a lot of work is undertaken in terms of visits and assessments. Yeah. And so the department is progressing through that, having the zones established there a number of days ago. Excuse me.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, and that's good to know, Nick. Good to know, Neil. Neil, another thing, Declan touched on it. He talked about the trade. When you have a cross-border, and I'm thinking of some of the flocks in Monaghan, as you said, the control zones there were included Northern Ireland or part of Northern Ireland too. Now, when it comes to trading, would those people would those Northern Ireland keepers within the control zone be affected in relation to trade, even though they're not directly affected by the influenza? Their flock's not affected by the influenza, but they're within the control zone.
Yes, the same terms and conditions would apply regardless. If the infected premises was near the border and on the Republic of Ireland side and the control zone was put in place, well then yes, the same conditions would apply to the Northern Ireland poultry keepers as would to the Southern poultry keepers, and the other way around. The reason is it's disease control. It's not about obviously the border in that sense. So the same kind of terms and conditions would apply, and we would then obviously through legislation we are required to take forward a specific outline of surveillance of licensing, of tracing and visits, and so therefore it is the same approach on both sides. The zone is what the primary route by way of which the government would take forward actions. So yes, both sides would have the same things applicable regardless of what side of the border you were on if you were in the zone. Yeah,
but then with regard to the trading, to those products being traded, is there an issue there? Even though they're not directly affected, but they're inside the control zone.
If they're inside the control zone, yes, the same issues would apply. For example, trade from a 3-kilometre PZ would be halted in terms of going to the EU. So, for example, if the site was in a PZ just over the border in Northern Ireland, but the site
Yes.
had been in the Republic of Ireland, well then yes, it would not be able to be exported to the EU. It would have to be used for the home market. And again, trade in the 10-kilometre zone is restricted to the EU for certain commodities like live birds and hatching eggs. The same thing would apply.
Yeah, that's great. That's clarity. Thank you very much for that,
Thank
Neil.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rosemary.
Thank you, Neil. Okay, I'm just checking on the list here. William, over the counter here, man.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and can I thank Neil for their update. I'd like to congratulate the department on their help and advice with those farmers affected. One farmer in particular that I spoke to was very appreciative of the help of the department and the advice that was given. He said it was invaluable to him. In relation to the export in a control zone, how long after the outbreak can they be opened up again to export? How long does that remain in place?
So thank you, William. So in a PZ can only be lifted at least 21 days after initial C&D has been carried out on the site, and then the surveillance zone is 30 days after the initial C&D on the site. Is it, Gemma, just so I'm correct on that point?
Gemma, you're still
Gemma,
technical
yeah.
problem.
Oh, still mute.
Well, that's not so bad. 21 days.
21 and 30 days, William.
30 days. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, William. Okay, and we'll go over now to County Down to Harry. Harry.
And thank you very much, Chair. Appreciate it. And just thinking, with this being the 6th outbreak and it being in Enniskillen, I see the call is taking place on the 7th of February. I'm just wondering, we are trying to trace where the infection is spread from. How many miles would it be, as the crow flies, to the nearest previous outbreak? And is there any connection that would be traceable? Thank you.
Thank you, Harry. I'll come back to you on how far it is in terms of the crow flies. I'm not sure. I don't have that information. In terms of where it comes from, we are not aware of where it comes from at present. Basically, the epidemiological investigations will be ongoing, and an EPI report will be provided shortly on that, and that will give a good indication to the department of where we believe it could come from. As I say, Jem is our veterinary advisor, but I know she's having trouble getting on this morning. So no firm conclusion of where it came from at the moment. But the key thing is, Harry, is that biosecurity is essential. Regardless of whether or not it's spread from one site to another, which is most likely unlikely in a small backyard flock in Enniskillen, or if it comes from a wild bird incursion, it is essential that biosecurity and the housing orders are adhered to in order to protect the flock. As we've discussed on the trade implications, a small backyard flock coming down with AI can have huge implications across an area with an SZ, PZ put in place, or a county, as it may be. In terms of trade implications, it's essentially important that people secure their poultry premises and adhere to the biosecurity regulations and housing order.
The danger being that a small backyard flock could infect a large commercial flock, isn't it? That's the problem. I'm just wondering, maybe you could tell me what number of birds were in the backyard flock, and will they be reimbursed? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Harry. So yes, I think it was 28 birds. It was a mixed species in the backyard flock, and we will be compensating for all of those that were called at the direction of the department. Charlotte, do you want to come in? I'm just correcting that thinking. I think it was 28.
27.
27. There we go.
Yeah.
So one got away. Very good. No, appreciate that, and thank you very much, Chair.
Just before we move to Tom, Neil, Harry mentioned just as a crow flies. Is that literally one of the main means whereby the disease would be transmitted between flocks?
It can be, Chair. Wild birds coming across Northern Ireland is one of the key concerns in terms of, they have, many of the wild birds have avian influenza. Our birds are susceptible to it, and that is why the housing order is an essential component of fighting this disease and the incursion into Northern Ireland. It's why the housing order in place from November has outlined quite clearly that all birds should be housed or otherwise kept separate from wild birds, and that is the reason why wild birds, are a significant source of AI, and it only takes a small amount of a bird dropping, for example, from a wild bird to get into a backyard flock or commercial premises to wipe it out. It's a major concern. So yes, absolutely.
Thank you. Tom? Tom? Tom here. Tom, can you hear us? Tom, can you hear us? Thomas?
Yes, I can. Hold on. Do you hear me now?
Yeah, we got you, yeah.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I'm using a different system today, so I'm out and on a wee bit here. And I want to thank the folk for their presentation. And if I missed a wee bit here at the start then, and this question has been covered, then my apologies. But I just wanted to ask something around the compensation, because we know that a number of farmers have been affected by this. Has compensation already been paid out to some of the farmers that has been affected? And can you give us, a sort of an update on how that side of the thing is going?
Yeah, happy to do so, Thomas. 6 sites affected in Northern Ireland, 3 have been agreed and paid as far as I'm aware. The Enniskillen site will obviously be outstanding. It's only recently went down with AI and we're in the process of agreeing evaluation there. We have 2 further sites that are in that we are still agreeing valuation with. One we expect to do so by the end of the week, and then the Auchnacloy site, which you're aware of, will incur quite a substantial, we envisage, compensation bill. There's still ongoing engagement with the owners of that site just to agree and finalise the compensation payable by the department on that front. So, as I say, 3 currently agreed, and as far as I know, paid. The 4th probably by the end of this week, and then the 5th is Enniskillen. It's only recently happened. I don't expect it to be too long. And then the 6th site was the Auchnacloy site, was the one that we are engaging with the owners on, just with the specific circumstances of that site and the stock they had. So.
Okay, thank you for that.
Okay, Thomas, let me see what we got here now. I think that's all of the members who wish to ask questions. So, Gemma, Charlotte and Neil, thanks very much for joining us this morning and for giving us that update, and we will be seeing you again in the future. So thanks very much for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, members. Thank
you, Night. Okay, members, I'm going to move on now to item number 6 on our agenda, which is an oral briefing from key stakeholders on the Animal Health and Welfare Common Framework. The next item is a discussion with stakeholders on the Animal Health and Welfare Common Framework, which was published on the 3rd of February. It's page 36 here pack is a memo from Nick the Clerk summarising the key aspects of the framework and some of the areas which we might want to raise for discussion. And I'd like to welcome by representatives to the meeting, David McClure, the Policy Officer of the Animal Health Officer Farmers Union, Colin Smith, Industry Development Manager, Livestock and Meat Commission, Sam Strain, Programme Manager, Animal Health and Welfare NI, Colin McRae, North of Ireland Veterinary Association, Susan Cunningham, North of Ireland Veterinary Association, and James O'Kane from the North of Ireland Veterinary Association as well. And folks, I'd like to thank you for joining us at such short notice. We're grateful for your attendance to discuss the common framework and any concerns or issues you would wish to raise in respect of the animal health and welfare policy. And if any of you have any opening remarks, please feel free to go ahead, and then members will want to ask questions thereafter. So you're very welcome this morning. Want to kick off there? Can you hear all right?
Chair, this is Sam Strain here. Maybe I can kick off and let the others maybe come in if that suits.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
Okay, so thank you, Chair and members for the invitation. I suppose my observations are quite general and quite high level. We've only received the document fairly recently, but there are a number of issues that have come to our minds in terms of the document itself, and I just wanted to flag them up to the committee if that's possible. Maybe the first thing to say is to, I suppose, welcome the underlying principles of the framework. It's absolutely essential that there is cooperation and coordination across the UK and Ireland in terms of disease control and animal health and animal welfare. Diseases do not respect boundaries or jurisdiction. So the principle underlying this is certainly very welcome. The document itself is quite high level, but there are probably 4 or 5 areas that we'd want to flag up to you as the committee around the framework, just to highlight them to you. That's perspective. So in the context of sort of trade and trade agreements, obviously those trade agreements may require or may stipulate animal health requirements within them. And I suppose one of our concerns is that it's essential that as those trade agreements are being developed and being negotiated by, for example, the Department of Trade and Industry, that cognizance is taken of animal health related issues within those agreements. So I don't think within the framework there's reference to those bodies that are developing trade agreements. But if those trade agreements do involve animal health issues, it's important that that expertise is sought in terms of bottoming out some of those issues. So, for example, there's protocols for the export of beef to China, for example, that stipulate animal health requirements around TB, but lots of other diseases as well. So it's important that as these are negotiated, that there's cognizance taken of the trade aspect. Probably the biggest area for us of concern is the question around endemic diseases. Obviously, this is all encompassing, this framework, but our sense is that the document really focuses on currently regulated diseases and exotic diseases. But there is a third very important group of diseases, the current endemic diseases, which are major constraints on animal production. And within Northern Ireland, within the Northern Ireland framework, we are now working within the European Union Animal Health Law, which incorporates a very large range of diseases that have historically not been subject to regulation within the UK or within Northern Ireland. So things like BVD, IBR, Johne's disease, and a range of other conditions. So I suppose what I'd want to raise with the committee, Chair, is that there's cognizance taken of those other endemic diseases. The context for Northern Ireland is that we are now working within this European Union Animal Health Law framework, which is different from the rest of the GB. So there is a divergence there, and it's important that these endemic diseases these currently non-regulated endemic diseases are taken account of in the framework documents somewhere, particularly given our context within the European Union Animal Health Law. Certainly our experience to date has been that these other diseases have not been a priority for government. And because of European Union Animal Health Law, they are going to increasingly become a priority or should become a priority. Related to that is the question around the need for industry engagement within the document. Obviously, the document is a government document within dealing with interactions between government departments. But it is important thinking about diseases that there are external agencies that will have interests in this. So in terms of priority setting, what diseases to be addressed, for example, but also in terms of expertises. So it's important that government taps into whatever expertise, wherever that might be, to help formulate policies. And a good example within the UK and in Ireland is SAGE within the UK and the universities in the Republic that have been feeding into, for example, the COVID guidelines during the last 2 or 3 years, where government is tapping into external expertise. So it's really important that government is able to do that, and that is part of the discussions and the framing of this framework. And I suppose the last one from me, I guess, is just the general context of the document. This may be contained in all the documents around this framework, but it is noteworthy to me, at least, that there are at least 2 key contexts that are absent from within the framework, and that's around really public good for disease control, and relates to antibiotic use, for example, and farm-associated greenhouse gas emissions. We know that key measures to reduce antibiotic use on farm and reduce farm-associated greenhouse gas emissions is through the effective control of endemic diseases. So I would suggest that it's important that for this document, is framed around that, because while reducing farm-associated greenhouse gas emissions is going to be incredibly challenging, one of the more tractable aspects of that is reducing endemic diseases. So I would suggest, Chair and Committee, that should be one of the framing contexts for this animal health welfare framework. And just the last observation in passing is one of transparency. So the document itself is really complex, the complex interactions between the different departments, and that's kind of inevitable, I suppose. But there is a danger of that leading to opacity, so that people, it isn't clear how, what the processes are, how the decisions are reached at, how they are reviewed, and how they are scrutinised. So I suppose just a passing comment is one around transparency, that as decisions are made, that they are transparent and open for scrutiny by bodies such as yourselves. But those are my starters for 10, Chair and Committee, and I'm sure the others will have all the thoughts to add into that. Thank you.
You thought, Sam? Do anybody else want to add to it, or do you want to come in response to questions? Okay. Well, listen, I suppose I'll kick off, and there's a couple of members who want to ask questions here as well. Sam, or indeed any is, this is obviously a common framework, right? But obviously you know that we in the north here will have to maintain parity with a significant amount of EU legislation. Can you see a strain emerging within the common framework, particularly if there's a post-Brexit, which there clearly is and going to be post-Brexit divergence? Can you see a strain emerging on trying to implement a common framework if, on one hand, we are aligned with the EU rules, EU legislation in this area, and Britain will go off on perhaps a different path? Can you see a strain for properly implementing a common framework?
I'll start off, Chair, on that, and certainly there will be. I think that was one of the things I was kind of alluding to in terms of the European Union animal health law. So an example of that is BVD controls, where ultimately we hope to be working within the European Union animal health legislation, so that our programme would be recognised, and ultimately we'd be recognised free of that particular disease, and that facilitates particularly live trade to the south, as they get their programme probably recognised this year and probably recognised free the following year. And so our direction of travel is somewhat different from the rest of the UK and GB. In GB, there are also BVD control programmes in Scotland, England and Wales. Each one of those are somewhat different. So that there is already some degree of divergence there. And certainly that is one of the key challenges, as I see going forward, in terms of that divergence, kind of east-west, as we try and maintain parity, so north-south, if you like. So that there will be challenges there.
So Sam, you said that there'll also be challenges between Wales and England, and Scotland and England as well, within those regions as well?
There are already, to some extent. So in terms of that particular disease, BVD, Scotland has a compulsory programme, England and Wales have voluntary programmes, and they're at different stages of their evolution, I suppose. So already we've seen situations, for example, in the Welsh-English border, where there's been moves of BVD positive animals from Wales into England, and that's clearly not in the English farmers, to their benefit, obviously. So all of these things have moving parts, I suppose. So there's kind of at the very local level, there's moving parts, but there's kind of more at the macro level as well. There's moving parts. So there are challenges here.
And just finally, before I move around the room, you mentioned, Sam, in your opening remarks about the need for industry engagement. Now, obviously, the chief vet is going to be have a crucial role representing our interests. What sort of structures are there in place between the chief vet and the industry professionals to ensure like a two-way engagement on policy matters?
So for us at least, for Animal Health and Welfare NI, we have probably two fora. There's an Animal Health and Welfare Stakeholder Forum, which is really a very high level discussion forum that a number of the others on the meeting will be invitees to, and that allows a high level discussion. At the more specific level of BVD, we have a liaison group meeting with actually Neil, who you were speaking to earlier, and other colleagues within the department that allows us to get into more detail, I suppose. Those meetings tend to be somewhat ad hoc and based upon particular needs at a particular time. Really, I suppose what I was trying to sort of allude to was the need for more concerted integration with department, and in terms of department, I suppose, priority setting. So for example, within the European Union Animal Health Law, there are categories C, D, and E diseases within that. Member states can choose which diseases, or regions can choose which diseases to focus upon. So, for example, the industry here in Northern Ireland might wish to focus on disease X as opposed to disease Y. And that would then be possibly ultimately incorporated within European Union animal health law. So there needs to be this really very deep engagement with the department around what are the priorities for industry in terms of diseases to be controlled, what that will actually look like, and also the support that's required from government. So it's important to say that for eradication diseases, there are certain things that really only industry can do, and industry is probably best placed to do. But there are also things that only government can do as well, and that's certainly one of our experiences within the BVD programme, for example, and that's undoubtedly going to be true for all the diseases as well. So I suppose what we're arguing for or suggesting is a much deeper engagement with the department around priority setting, but also in terms of expertises as well. So the department has the potential, at least, to tap into a very large range of expertises, outside of the department, AFBI here in Northern Ireland, but also universities and so on. It's important that we get the best thoughts, the best ideas from across the spectrum, not just from within government, I think.
Thank you, Sam. I'm going to move around here now. We have the first person who wants to ask a question is William.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I thank Sam for his update and presentation. In relation, you did say that there are diseases that are an issue or a concern to the EU that are not as big a concern for GB. What are those diseases? Because I would have thought most diseases would be a concern for both jurisdictions.
So I suppose it's not to compare it to TB, because TB is a huge concern, William. So I'm not in any way downplaying TB. I suppose that the concern is that there's these other diseases that have tended to be regarded as production diseases. So they're not diseases that have an impact on human health, for example, directly at least. They have an impact on human health in terms of antibiotic use and driving antibiotic resistance potentially. They have public good issues. So they have tended to be less of a priority for governments. That said, across Europe, there's a huge number of countries and regions that have control programs for diseases that we certainly have here in Northern Ireland, but we don't have coordinated control programs for. So, for example, respiratory disease of cattle, IBR, for example, it's a huge constraint here in Northern Ireland. We don't have a coordinated control program for that. The Republic is very close to launching a control program for that, and there are very well advanced control programs across Europe for that. So I suppose it's more the thought, William, of looking at endemic diseases as a priority for the department. It's not to downplay TB at all, but it's just to say to raise the profile for these other diseases. I think that's my thought.
Yeah, and you see that been an issue in relation to live act? I don't think that there's not a lot of live exports from Northern Ireland to the EU other than maybe the Republic. But can you see that becoming a barrier to live exports if we don't have the same level of control?
Well, certainly for BVD, as the Republic moves towards eradication, that will have implications for us in terms of live exports. There already is issues around IBR for live exports across the EU, around that. That's been there for some time. But probably the bigger issues to my mind, and maybe Colin and David might want to chip in here, but would be around other diseases like Johne's disease, which are becoming increasingly on the radar for purchasers of animal products. So milk powders, for example, premium beef, for example, where those countries are asking, what's the provenance of the animals that produce these products? What's the levels of these other diseases? So these diseases are starting to raise their head in terms of trade agreements internationally.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I understand, and I think Johne's is no doubt Johne's is an issue for many larger farms. I'm not saying it's a major issue, but I think it raises its ugly head here and there, and not easy to get rid of. It's a disease that, to my knowledge, and I'm not a vet, but I mean, I'm told there can be carriers of the disease that don't actually show that disease, so that can be difficult to cull out of the herd.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks for that. Patsy? Sorry.
I see David's wanting to come in, so...
Sorry.
Yes, Chair, can you hear me okay?
Yes, David, we got you.
Yeah, sorry, I did have my hand raised, but I'm not sure just with the technology of Starlead, whether you can see it or not. One topic that I thought might be worth moving on into, we've sort of discussed animal health issues already, but let's not forget that the title of this document also includes animal welfare. I suppose part of my remit within the Ulster Farmers Union, I would be providing feedback within European circles, and there are quite a number of murmurings of change within various sectors across the portfolio coming from the EU. As you know, especially within intensive sectors, but not limited. There are also murmurings of change within ruminant production systems, and given our unique position, some of these welfare changes are likely to apply to our farms within Northern Ireland. And you could very easily see a situation where there's divergence within welfare standards. Now, such a situation, in my mind, regardless of the perceived or actual welfare gains or benefits to animals, you're going to see a situation there whereby farmers perhaps within Northern Ireland are going to have a differing level of standard to adhere to. And I think it would be important that there's collaboration across the four nations to ensure that we're on a level playing field. A different production system within Northern Ireland is fine, but let's not forget that a lot of our market is also within GB.
Okay, thank you for that, David. I see Susan, have you your hand up as well? Susan?
I have indeed, yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we got you, yeah.
I just, wanted to thank Sam for that very comprehensive introduction to what we're talking about. He raised a very good point about the climate emergency context, and I was thinking that is bound to raise tensions given the climate change bills in front of the Assembly at the moment, that if we need to legislate locally in order to meet a different target from the rest of the UK in terms of zero emissions, that is going to result in divergence, and that the audience should be aware when considering those matters that this will have implications within that framework. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you. That's Susan. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Patsy, do you want to come in there? Patsy?
That's me now. I'm on there. I wanted to come to the issue of the products of animal origin and the standards and issues around that. Now, I've been looking at the recent trade deal with Australia. Now, from what I can read on that, there hasn't been, or there wasn't any inbuilt safeguards negotiated about food standards, or indeed any mechanism inbuilt into that to review those standards. Now, what you'll probably know is food standards, all those types of things are increasingly a major factor for consumers in general. So I'm clearly a bit concerned that here we have at one level we're talking about our ability to maintain good standards, good animal welfare standards, good food standards and the likes, and yet that is being opened up to being undermined by trade deals elsewhere, which are going to, so the standards that we're talking about applying to and here, adhering to here are going to be placed at risk, and the market's placed at risk by trade deals elsewhere. So have you got any views on that, please, just?
If I can answer that, Chair, and thanks, Patsy, for the opportunity. Certainly from a beef and sheep point of view, obviously we trade about 80% of our 70-80% of our beef into GB, and a significant proportion, maybe 40 to 45% of our lamb goes south into the EU. So trade in a country the size of Northern Ireland, maybe 1.8 million consumers, trade is absolutely essential. And I think with this document, what we want to ensure is that there needs to be a connect, and Sam mentioned that in his opening remarks, there needs to be a connect with those people that are doing the trade deals, where those trade deals are being done, and those people that are negotiating standards, and the standards that we have to meet here, because you're right in what you say in terms of we need, and David mentioned it as well, we need to have that level playing field. Costs of production are rising in Northern Ireland at the minute, and we need to make sure that our production base can be competitive going forward. And therefore, there certainly needs to be that engagement with industry and those people who are as businesses trading, to make sure that our standards, that this document indeed is fit for purpose, and it addresses those potential differences in standards between those, you mentioned the likes of Australia, those people that may have access to the markets that we're trading into, to the UK internal market in the future, that we are able to trade on a level playing field. So I think whilst and Sam mentioned this, while the principle of a common framework is sound, it really needs to work in practice, and there needs to be a connect. And I'm not sure that in this document there is a connect between those people negotiating trade deals and those people, assuring that standards are met across the UK. So I'm not sure, Patsy, if I completely addressed that for you, but I think that the issue you raise is right, and it's key that we're not put at a competitive disadvantage.
Yeah, well, if I'm just, Chair, with your forbearance, if I'm picking it up right, okay, there will be certain standards that will apply here in the market in the north, okay, those are EU driven. Now, so, but the big market that you refer to, you have 1.8 million potential consumers here, which is grand, but the big market you refer to in the UK, your potential to sell into that market with good standards could be undermined where there are trade deals negotiated where standards, food standards, are not uppermost, if included at all, in those trade deal negotiations. That's the conundrum. And how do you join up the dots to make sure that standards apply, good food standards and animal welfare standards, of course, too, apply to right across that market? That's essentially the conundrum we're in for you, potentially.
Yeah, that is a significant challenge. If people accessing the GB market are operating to lower standards than what we are having to operate here, that certainly can put our producers at a competitive disadvantage, and that is a significant challenge given the costs that we're already under here.
And if I could just bring it to the next step, what do you envisage as a company, indeed as an industry, as being the best way to ensure that, to make sure that does not happen?
I think, as I say, there needs to be
trade deals.
Yeah, I mean, I think essentially there needs to be cognizance and mindfulness of the industry here, and and the contribution that the industry here makes to the economy here, and respecting that, and therefore when negotiating these trade deals, be mindful of that. And we can only encourage those people involved in that, and know the document states clearly that the UK do those trade deals as a whole. But it goes back to the engagement piece, and it's just on the document, Patsy, it's not very clear to me how there is that link between the commercial reality of trade and this document that talks about, how the policies will be set and how the CBOs will talk to the government, and it just doesn't seem to be that connect with industry. And I think the important part of this should be clear is how there is a line in it to say that the views of those potentially affected will be taken at the earliest reasonable opportunity, and be mindful of these views. But that's the only mention that I can see in the document, that there is engagement with industry, and I think there needs to be really true, meaningful engagement with industry, because ultimately it's the processors and farmers that will be at the wrong end of a poor trade deal. So I think there needs to be that engagement early on, and meaningful engagement.
Yeah, and consumers as well, if there is a drop in food standards.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. There's a communication piece that LMC is involved in, to try and highlight to consumers to what to look for when looking for local produce, high standards, and we need to do that. But absolutely, consumers are the ultimate, end consumer. They're the ones taking the product, and they need to be aware of what's coming onto the market.
Would you mind sharing that with us, that piece of work that you've done, please, Colin?
Yeah,
for
absolutely. We can share with you the work that we're doing in terms of highlighting, the standards and our farm quality assurance scheme that LMC run. That's the basis for our promotional work. So we can certainly share the work that we're doing with you.
Okay, so just in a nutshell, as a committee, what is your intention for the DAERA committee? What should we be doing to ensure that there's protection of those standards, and to make sure that trade deals do not undermine the industry here?
I think probably two things. I think if the committee could ensure that there is a connection between those people negotiating the trade deals and those people that this document refers to, in terms of the animal health and welfare standards that are I suppose, agreeing those standards, and to think there needs to be a connect. And I think the second thing then is that there needs to be really, really strong and meaningful engagement with industry at some point, which I'm not clear on. So those two things I think would help to at least improve that situation.
Okay, thanks very much indeed. Thank you.
Okay, Patsy. Okay, we're going to move across to Fermanagh. Rosemary.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody, for what you've said so far. I would like to speak to David there, David McClure, Ulster Farmers Union. David, I've heard about the industry and the various effects that this may have, but I was wondering, David, within this common framework, can you tell me what you think is worthwhile and what would give you cause for concern?
Rosemary, I'm not in a position to highlight that at this stage. I suppose if I was, it would be my personal view. The structure of the union would be such that it's liaised through our committee structure, and then a union opinion would be given. And given that we've only really received this document in the early part of this week, the timescales don't facilitate me to give a union view on at this period of time. So I think it would be improper of me to do that, Rosemary.
Well, are there any things that you personally see that could become problematic within the agricultural industry?
Well, I suppose going back to what my initial point was regarding welfare standards, I do get an eye opener to what those proposals are within EU circles. Some of those would concern me significantly if they were implemented in Northern Ireland, but not adhered to across the four regions.
Right, so you're concerned about divergence within the 4 regions and perhaps we having to adhere to higher standards?
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And who have we got here now? Okay, John Blair. John?
Thank you, Chair, and thank all of those we've heard from as well. Chair, just drawing on some of the comments from the sector in particular, can I ask what consultation there's been between the department here in Northern Ireland and departments across the jurisdictions with industry representatives and sector representatives in developing these frameworks and any policies that might flow from them?
Well, John, from my perspective, there's been no consultation on this with our organisation. So this, when we received this document, this was the first we had seen of this from Animal Health and Welfare NI. So this effectively been done from our perspective. So the others will probably want to chip in from their perspective.
Yeah, through the chair, John. I think I'm right in saying that this is exactly the same position as what Sam has outlined. That I don't recall having seen this document before being asked to look at it for today.
Okay, Colin, and just to be clear, you were sent the document from the department?
No, just from the committee in preparation for today.
Okay, right. Can we then get, probably Sam for this one, can we get any assurance that the department will engage in conversations and consultation around this then?
Well, John, I sincerely hope so. I mean, we're a not-for-profit company. We run the endemic disease control programs here in Northern Ireland for what diseases were not historically regulated. So certainly we would be, from our perspective, very keen to engage frequently and deeply around these issues with other industry colleagues across the industry here. But that would be our hope, and we certainly, our door is always open to discuss these with the department.
Okay, and it's something the committee can try to pursue as well. Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Philip?
Yeah, it may be worth, I mean, I see Susan has put something onto the chat, it might be worth exploring. I mean, we haven't obviously set our targets yet because they haven't fully went through legislation, but, you know, we're not setting more ambitious targets than anywhere else. I mean, Scotland have 2045, Wales have 2050, the South is 2050, so, you know, what we're actually trying to do by setting net zero targets by 2050 is actually harmonising climate policies across these islands and across Europe, because that's, I mean, all jurisdictions are going towards net zero. What we would have been doing, in fact, previously is setting a less ambitious target and putting ourselves potentially at a disadvantage. So I think that point just needs to be cleared up.
Okay. Sorry, Nick, do you want to come in there or something?
Chair, thank you. Just for the purposes of clarity, following John's comment and question, just to where we are at the stage of common framework development. The common frameworks have been collectively developed by the administrations across England, Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland, and they have all a range of them have been published last week, and they are now at the stage of parliamentary scrutiny. So each of the administrations is undertaking separate scrutiny of the provisional documents which have been published. So what we are doing through these sessions is to get feedback and views from industry that will then help to inform the committee's recommendations and observations on the common frameworks. So just to clarify that is the procedure which we are going through at the moment.
Okay. Colin, I see you had your hand up. Is that from a previous time, or do you want to come in something there, Colin?
It was from a previous time, but I'll throw my 2 pence worth in anyway. I suppose it's sort of supporting a wee bit what Sam says, because I think there's obviously a couple of different a linked up view, but maybe coming from a slightly different angle. So I'm representing practicing vets in Northern Ireland, and Sam very much sort of talking about his BVD and IBR, are clinical diseases we see across Europe, but I suppose I'm focusing specifically on Northern Ireland because that's where my work base is. And a wee bit what David said, if we look to improve our standards, it'll, without, I suppose there's a difficulty there. We don't want to put our industry at a disadvantage by putting constraints that leave them at a disadvantage financially, but by improving our standards on those production diseases, we could have the opposite effect by actually giving us a better financial advantage, both in terms of our performance and our welfare. Obviously, feeding into that, then we have an export market that we need to make sure that we keep ourselves on the right side of. So, as Sam said, we already export to the Republic, but if they have a different market or a different strategy in some diseases than that we're adopting, then we are going to put ourselves at disadvantage. So there seems to be two approaches. We need to look at what we can do at a local level and engage the local, so the vets. We have a great setup with Avani, with Sam heading it is fantastic, as well as then including the LMC and the Farmers Union at a wider European level or world market where we I know Patsy talked about Australia having they coming in and undermining us, but we also have to look at maybe we need to be exporting further than wider than just the GB and Ireland. Maybe we have an opportunity to open up markets that we're not currently looking at.
Thank you, Colin. Colin, just when you're speaking there, just wondering what your opinion. Do you think it would be helpful if there was a veterinary agreement between the EU and the UK? Would that aid the implementation of a common framework?
Oh, that's maybe above my pay grade. That
sorry, just when you're on.
I think there's a few issues. Again, I don't know if this is maybe not necessarily the right forum, but I don't do a lot of poultry work, but I've had a lady who is looking to export day-old chicks to the south, and in the current paperwork that's been drawn up for it, there's a requirement to test for salmonella. There's no labs in either the north or the south of Ireland that have the suitable qualifications to carry out these tests. So I was maybe going back a wee bit to engagement, or market engagement. Somebody has come up with this legislation, but it currently can't be carried out in Northern Ireland or the Republic because there isn't an accredited test. So I think yes, there certainly has to be an agreement across maybe wider than just north-south GB-EU. There has to be a look at where certain things are going to be carried out, and that joint up approach has to be looked at, and then that's feeding back into what Sam said again. There's a lot of very knowledgeable people within the industry. Particularly, I suppose I'm thinking particularly the veterinary industry, who should be tapped into, and maybe, as we've all said, this was presented. I got this 2 days ago as well, so I haven't really had time to go through the framework. And there's part of the problem. We're all there's a huge time pressure to get a lot of this stuff through, but we need to make sure we don't rush it and then make mistakes on it.
Thanks, Colin. Sam, you looking in there?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just on your comment about European cooperation, I suppose there's actually almost two parallel universes happen across Europe. So there's the statutory universe of chief vets and so on who will be engaging with each other across Europe. But there's also groups like ours which will be engaging across Europe for other diseases. So we're part of a consortium that involves something like 30 different groups across Europe looking at endemic disease control programs across Europe. So there is good cooperation for those bodies like ourselves that are involved in other endemic disease control programs Where I would suggest there's a disconnect is between those two groups. So there's the statutory group and the non-statutory group, if you like, and there really needs to be, I think, a joining of those two dots together, because certainly within the EU animal health law, essentially all of these diseases have been brought into one legislative framework within the EU. So I think there's historically been a disconnect between what government focuses on, such like TB, avian flu, and so on, and all of the other diseases. But actually, in reality, if we want to control diseases, the same principles apply across the board. So there is a need for more joined up thinking between government and industry, I think, in terms of joining the two sides of the brain together, if you like. Just a comment, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sam. That's very helpful. Thank you very much. Okay, members, we see now. I don't think I have anybody else down. Okay, so that concludes it. I want to thank the representatives for coming here this morning. Very detailed presentation and very detailed answers to our questions and queries as well. And hope you have a nice day, and we look forward to seeing you all again. Okay, folks. Good luck to you. Okay, members.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ina. We're going to move on now to the next briefing, and that's from in relation to the fertilizers common framework. The full framework is at page 120 of the pack, today's pack, and a summary from the clerk. The framework sets out an approach that deals with importing, exporting, sales, and use of fertilizers, and to manage policy development and potential divergence in these areas. I want to welcome Jill Gallagher, Chief Executive of NI Grain Trade Association, Bruce Steele, Chairperson of the Ulster Arable Society, Eva Ross, Marketing Manager of DAERA International, and Richard Kennedy, Product Stewardship Manager of DAERA International. And I'd like to thank you for joining us this morning. And if any want to do some opening remarks, and then we can move on to members' questions after your opening remarks. So you're very welcome.
Well, good morning, everyone. Eva Ross is my name. I'm business manager there with DAERA Ireland. I've looked through as part of the document, not all of it, but I'm looking forward to engaging on it going forward and seeing what is the best way forward on it.
Does any of the other members want to, any other witnesses joining us this morning want to raise any questions or anything in relation to it?
Mr. Chair, no other comment from me at the moment, thank you.
Aye, no problem at all.
Mr. Chair, just to say thank you very much for inviting us today to discuss it, and look forward to the members' questions on the framework. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I suppose, move straight to questions then. I know you probably haven't had said this for that particularly long, but see from your analysis of it so to date, do you see any, are there any difficulties that you foresee with the introduction of a new fertiliser regime here locally in the north? Any of you?
Chair, if I could maybe step in just from NICTA's perspective, in reading the framework, I think in principle it's very sensible to be looking for a common framework on fertiliser, but obviously it needs to work in practice, and that's what we will have to see. The devil will be in the detail. But I mean, in the north here, we have always, I suppose, had our own different fertiliser regulations compared to Southern Ireland and across the water, because we are unable to use ammonium nitrate here. So that's not unusual. However, I think it will be good to have the opportunity to look at designing fertiliser regulations for us here, which take account of the new regulations coming in Europe, but that hopefully will allow us an opportunity to take a more common sense approach and maybe iron out some of the technical concerns that we would have with the new FRP that are due to come in July. So from that perspective, I would think that there's a good opportunity within this framework to address those challenges.
Thanks, Jill. And tell me, has your organisation, or did any of the organisations represented here this morning, have you had any opportunity to engage with the UK Committee on Fertilisers regulations?
Yes, we are affiliated with the Agricultural Industries Confederation, AIC, within the UK. We would be the regional arm of AIC. And as such, they actually have been directly engaging with the FRC. So through AIC, we would be working with them.
Okay. And, again, do you see any, sort of challenges with maintaining, obviously maintaining regulation with Britain, and also our requirements here as well under the protocol?
I think there's an opportunity within the framework to look at that. I mean, certainly the framework does reference divergence, and that is something that we will have to manage carefully. But as I say, I think there's an opportunity to look at the new European regulations that are coming in, and to try and adopt a more common sense approach to them, and maybe a more common sense version which is more applicable.
And obviously, as a scrutiny committee here, we'd be cognizant of what DAERA does. Does DAERA currently engage with industry in respect to fertiliser policy? How do you feel about that level of engagement?
We've been speaking with DAERA recently on it, and certainly we welcome the opportunity to continue the discussions, particularly once this framework is agreed. As we understand, there will be a consultation coming forward at some stage later in the year on fertiliser regulations, and certainly we'd be keen to continue close engagement with DAERA on that.
And is there any aspects of the framework that you have concerns with, or that you feel would be challenging? Anything cause for concern?
From my perspective, and I'll maybe let some of the others come in here, because I don't want to hog the floor. Others may have other views on it, but I mean, essentially it's a framework, and the principle of it is pretty sound. But as I say, it'll come down to, when it's been implemented, what happens in practice, and that's probably where we'll need to play closer scrutiny. But I mean, at the moment, as the framework is written, it's fairly common sense from our perspective anyway. But I'll maybe allow some of my colleagues to comment on their perspective.
Yeah. Anything else? Any other views? Any opportunities or challenges or that you can envisage with this framework?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, if I can just come in there, and thanks, Jill. Yeah, I'd agree with Jill in that it's more when we kind of get down into the detail and how that will look in reality. I suppose one concern that we would have is, yes, we'll have the FPR regulations in the Republic of Ireland, then the regulations in Northern Ireland, and we would have currently a dual declaration on the back of our bag, because obviously it's upside form for the fertiliser in Northern Ireland and then elemental form in the Republic of Ireland. So it's kind of getting down into that reality and then seeing how it all progresses regarding the labelling of the bags and those kind of issues.
Thank you, Eva. Patsy?
Yeah, just thanks very much for attending today. Hello, Chair, can you hear me okay there?
Patsy, yeah.
Yep. I was just looking at the document, and there's one aspect, 9.6 there, refers to the overarching policy objectives to ensure farmers have access to effective and safe fertilisers. What's the arbiter of safe, aside from the ammonium nitrate? What's the arbiter there of what do you determine as safe, as environmentally safe, as safe to users? What's the definition there, or is there one? Do you know?
I would think safety probably encompasses a number of factors. I would think it is absolutely on the ammonium nitrate side of things, but also beyond that, in terms of contaminants as well. And that would be something I suppose we have a bit of a concern with in relation to the European regulations, particularly around organic fertilisers, and how they will be able to guarantee that the level of contaminants within those organic fertilisers are carefully managed, because we certainly don't want to have any kind of food safety issue arising from that. So I would imagine that it'll have to encompass the contaminant side of things, as well as safety to the user. But I can certainly look for more information on that, Patsy, and maybe provide a written briefing afterwards.
Yeah, I would appreciate that, John. Thank you. Okay.
Okay. Well, listen, I would like to take the opportunity, Bruce, Richard, Eva and Jill, thank you very much for joining us here this morning and for answering our questions. And again, thank you, and hopefully we'll be seeing you again in the not too distant future. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you now. Right. Okay, members, we're going to move on now to item number 8 on our agenda. It's a written briefing from DAERA. It's to do with capacity issues in respect of planning, consultation, response times. Members, you'll recall that we sought an update from the Department on the measures it's put in place in order to address the backlog of planning applications in NIEA. The response is at page 162 of the pack and outlines that the Department has redeployed staff and contracted agency workers to address the backlog. It's actively engaging in permanent recruitment for new staff. It's not providing indicative response times for any consultation and is not accommodating any prioritisation requests. The Department reports a 42% decline in the backlog and intends to review its control measures later this month. Members, can I had a look over the report there at the minute, and there's a couple of things which just jumps out at me there. For example, there's currently 213 planning applications backlogged, and members, you know, as MLAs and some of you are councillors as well, if you're working with people who have planning applications in for various, for example, on-farm developments, they have invested a lot of money in this, might have borrowed a lot of money in it, and their planning application can, in many instances, if they've been awarded funding, say for example through the Farm Business Improvement Scheme, their funding may hinge on successful planning application being passed by a certain time. So I just think that there's a lot at stake for people, and there's 213 outstanding consultation responses. So I just think it's potentially very, and I'm sure we all deal with people like this all the time, and how stressful and economically challenging it is for them. So this is a very, to me, it's a very serious issue, and I think, you know, would members be content to be right back to the department, obviously highlighting, you know, the seriousness of getting appropriate response times for such planning applications, and also for a further update next month.
I would fully back you on that, Mr. Chairman. I think response times have been dismal. I mean, they're not meeting their own target of response times by months on end. I had one particular one I think I mentioned before, the committee in November. The response due back was the 1st of July, and then at the beginning of November they still weren't back. So while they may have tried to get more resources, I think they should have been doing that much earlier. They let the situation get into a very bad state before they done that.
Yeah.
Chair.
Yes, Rosemary
here. Chair, I would totally agree, concur with what both you and William have said. It does worry me a little that they're still recruiting. You know, this has been an ongoing issue over the past number of years, and yet we're still reading here that they're still looking to recruit officers. Surely there should have been more cognizance taken of the number of planning requests that were being made and started recruiting earlier.
Yeah, maybe that's something we should be including perhaps in our response, Rosemary, to the department on this. You know, because say all of you is like, I know it, and you know it's extremely stressful for people in this situation. You know, where, for example, as I said, a grant could hinge on it. They've got big loans taken out and they need to progress. You know, and they're getting they're coming under a lot of financial stress, and this has caused a lot of a huge issue for them. So it'd be important if we can get good progress in this to get the response times turned around as fast as possible. I have John and then Tom. John?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And you've touched on the subject already of the stress involved for those concerned. But in addition to that, and I'm sure we will mention in the response, there's a whole aspect here of business development, business continuity, in relation to grants, etc. Also, the economy general, and if we can cover all that and pointing this out to these people, but also not ignoring that stress for the individuals concerned.
Extreme distress.
Yeah.
Tom? Tom?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I totally agree with the action that you're planning to take and writing back. But this is a serious issue, and I think it's simply not acceptable for NIEA to be holding back and again coming back to us and saying they're not going to respond and they're not going to prioritise applications. All of this type of thing. This has been on now and has escalated over the last period of time. And, if we're serious about climate change, for example, and this has been much to the fore this last few weeks, farmers needs to have the mechanism through the planning service to be able to, get that planning approval to allow them to develop their new buildings or whatever in order to comply with climate change legislation, in order to be able to reduce the amount of the carbon footprint on their land and to be able to, be much more efficient in these ways. But this is holding them back, and this has held the farmers back for the last couple of years or more, where they have been unable to improve their farm development proposals because they've been held back by NIEA and not getting the responses that's required. So, I think it has a huge knock-on effect within the whole agriculture industry, and the fact that this type of thing is happening, and I do think we need to put as much pressure as we can on them in order to get the responses through as quick as we can.
Thank you, Thomas. Claire?
Thanks, Chair. I'm looking at Action 2 there, and it states then that the Department will no longer provide indicative response times, and I'm wondering, has that been assessed at all? Because I know that councils, for example, they have targets to meet and times for turnaround, and one of their biggest challenges is the length of time the consultees take to respond. So has there been an assessment on any knock-on impact for councils if there's no response time?
That's a really good point, because councillors are trying to get plan permissions out the door and they're sitting, waiting in the system, waiting for responses. I think that's really important. Claire,
and I know DFI publish their response times on an annual report as well, so I think it's all linked and very important.
Yeah, and I think, when we get in the report here, there's 213 outstanding consultation responses. That's 213 families, 213 businesses, 213, people and more who are under pressure, So I think it's important that we collectively impress upon the department the importance of doing their best to try and get these out the door. Philip?
Could I ask?
Sorry, Claire.
Sorry, Chair. Could I ask another one?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Listen, I'm looking. They're saying that 709 consultation responses were dealt with. Is there any way that we would be able to find out the breakdown of those council areas that those applications were in? How many of those applications? That's a huge number that was shifted in a very short space of time. But what council areas they were from, and how many were major or minor applications? How many were refused, for example? And then find out what measures that the Natural Environment Division use for their assessment. Can the committee get sight of that?
Yeah, request. Anyway.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, William.
So whenever I find to ask all those questions, but you'll take up one or two officers' time for a few days doing that. That's the difficulty of some of these requests.
I think it's important for councils as well.
Yeah. Okay. Well, sure. Listen, it's noted here in the response. Philip, you're next on the list.
Chair, I have no disagreement with any of the questions that people have asked them, but William made a point about the time that we'll be taking up getting the answers. But I actually also think that there's a lot more needs to be teased out. I actually seen contradictions in the report, or think I've seen contradictions in what they're saying about not having time frames but reducing the volume. So I actually think it'd be much more productive if we invited a couple of officials here to talk through some of the issues and ask the questions face to face, letting them know in advance of the kind of things that we may or may not be raising.
That's a good suggestion. That request will go into the committee's happy enough. Patsy?
Chair, I'm not too sure whether this is the correct forum for raising it or not, but anyway, I'm going to power along. And we all know that consultations coming back from government, from respective departments, whether it's DAERA or indeed DFI, are creating problems at planning. So I'm wondering just, there are some jurisdictions whereby, I think down south, whereby if the formal consultation isn't back within a specified period of time, the body, the planning authority can go ahead and make the determination in absentia. In other words, that they have a turnaround time. If they don't meet that target, that's their fault, if you like. So is there any way that we can forward this along to, would it be, I'm not quite sure whether it's communities or DFI, for further consideration around the whole question of consultations back to local authorities, because honestly it's just holding up so many industrial developments, so many individual homes where people want a consultation back, and frankly it's not efficient, it's not good government, and it's not good enough for the people who are trying to move these things on. And as we know, costs of development are increasing almost month on month as materials and labour costs go up. So if I could make a suggestion, if we could sift through which department it might be to ask them what consideration is going on into trying to have an established set turnaround time by which the planning authority must have the consultation, or else the planning authority can go ahead and make its own determination.
I think, Patsy, you're 100% right. Time costs a lot of money, and there's a lot of people who have borrowed heavily, and the delay, they'll have to pay back their instalments, and the delay is just costing them. So I do think that we need it. This is something that's really important, and it's good that there's a collective committee view around this here, and a good few actions have come out of it. Nick, to forward to the department for request, okay, and for consideration. Okay, Nick?
Yep.
Okay, members, thank you very much for that. We're going to get right off the department with all those actions, and also requesting an oral briefing from them on the matter. Okay, members, item number 9 is correspondence. It's page 210 of your pack. There's a copy of the UK and a Changing Europe report on how policy is developing and diverging from Europe post-Brexit. It discusses issues relating to devolved administrations and various agriculture and environmental matters. Members content to note. Also, members, you recall we wrote to the Mid and East Antrim Borough Council in January advising that they should follow up the committee's recommendation to correspond the Cabinet Office to clarify PSNI's assessment of the threat to port staff in January last year. The committee has advised that this issue will be tabled as council meeting on the 7th of March. The committee will be informed of the outcome. Members, okay if we action the correspondence suggested in the index sheet at page 168? Also, members, in your table pack you'll see a reply from the House of Lords Common Framework Scrutiny Committee in respect of issues that we should be aware of. In summary, the committee has highlighted concerns around a lack of engagement with the Irish Government in respect of common framework matters, lack of engagement with voluntary community sectors here to identify areas where common frameworks may be needed, emerging concerns about the implications of the Subsidy Control Bill and how this will affect cross-jurisdiction working. Members content that we reply thanking the committee and include these considerations in our common framework scrutiny papers. Okay. Members, forward work programme, page 320. Can I seek agreement with the forward work programme? Okay. Members, and number 11 is any other business. I just want to mention a special thank you to all of the stakeholders who participated in the Women in Agriculture stakeholder event last Thursday evening. It was a very, very robust and informative discussion coming on the back of the inquiry that we carried out and the consultation. And maybe it might be appropriate to ask Nick maybe to give a wee update of where we're at and what the next steps are, and then I'll come back to any other business that you might have.
Chair, thank you. Yes, indeed. So in terms of proposed next steps for the committee's work in this area, while it is not scheduled in the forward work programme, I would be planning next week in the committee meeting to allocate some time in closed session for the committee to consider and more fulsomely its draft report which synthesises the work undertaken to date and the recommendations that the committee may wish to make to the department and others. And also next week it would bring forward proposals for how we may most appropriately launch the committee's report. And so that would be the intention, that we would allocate some time next week for the committee to consider that.
Thank you for that, Nick. And once again, just a thank you to everyone who participated in the consultation, and thank you sincerely to the people who participated last Thursday evening. If any of you are listening in here this morning, we really appreciate the time you took out for a very, very informative and interesting discussion. Okay, members, the next meeting will take place on Thursday the 17th of February at 10 a.m. and it'll be a hybrid meeting streamed on the Assembly website. I want to thank anyone who's been listening in to the meeting this morning, and we'll see you all again next week. But members, stay on board, because we just have to have a bit of a conversation around the future agriculture policy. So anyone who's been listening, thanks very much for joining us this morning.